You were not born to be liked. You were not designed to be validated. And the moment you started needing approval, you started losing control of your life. Every time you explain yourself, every time you seek permission, every time you wait for reassurance, your power leaks out silently. This audiobook will show you how to build a mind that stands alone, calm, grounded, unmoved by opinions. When you no longer need approval, nothing can manipulate you. And that is real freedom. Chapter 1. Stop explaining yourself. Most people don't realize this, but the moment you start explaining yourself, you've already given up leverage. You weren't asked for clarity. You were asked for confidence, and instead, you offered justification. Explanation is not clarity. Explanation is fear. Watch how people speak when they don't trust themselves. They talk more. They add context no one requested. They defend decisions that were never under attack. They try to convince instead of declare. That's not communication. That's insecurity leaking out in sentence form. You have a choice. You can state your decision and stand in it, or you can explain it and slowly weaken yourself. That's the key. Over-explaining is not about helping others understand. It's about soothing your own anxiety. It's about wanting approval in advance. It's about saying, "Please don't judge me for this," and the world can feel that weakness instantly. You don't need their permission. Confident people speak once, clearly, calmly, then they stop. They don't hover. They don't check reactions. They don't fill silence with nervous noise. They allow the discomfort to exist, because discomfort is not danger. Explanation is not clarity. Explanation is fear. Think about real authority, real leaders, not loud ones, not charismatic performers, real decision makers. When they speak, they don't over-decorate their words. They don't say, "I might be wrong, but." They don't say, "Just my opinion." They don't soften every sentence to protect feelings. They say what needs to be said, then they move on. They understand something most people never learn. The more you explain, the less people trust you. You have a choice. You can keep trying to be understood by everyone, or you can respect yourself enough to be misunderstood by some. That's the key. Over-explaining trains people to question you. It invites negotiation where none was offered. It signals that your decision is flexible, shaky, and open to influence. And once you open that door, people walk right in. At work, this shows up when you justify every boundary. In relationships, when you explain why you need space. In life, when you defend choices that align with your values. Stop doing that. You don't need their permission. Your life is not a courtroom. You don't need evidence. You don't need witnesses. You don't need a closing argument. You need alignment. You need discipline. It's not about being rude. It's not about being cold. It's about being grounded. Explanation is not clarity. Explanation is fear. Here's the truth most people avoid. If someone genuinely respects you, they don't need a long explanation. They accept your statement. If they don't respect you, no amount of explanation will ever be enough. So why exhaust yourself? You have a choice. Every time you open your mouth, you can either reinforce authority or erode it. Every extra sentence past what is necessary usually does the second. That's the key. Start noticing your behavior. Notice when you feel the urge to explain. That urge is a signal. It's your nervous system asking for reassurance. It's your ego asking to be liked. That's where discipline begins. When the urge appears, pause. State your position once, then stop. Let silence do the work. Silence is not weakness. Silence is pressure. Silence forces others to process. Silence communicates certainty. Most people are terrified of silence because it gives up control, and that's exactly why it's powerful. You don't need their permission. In leadership, this principle is non-negotiable. The best leaders don't manage emotions, they manage direction. They don't argue with every opinion, they don't defend every move. They set a standard, communicate it clearly, and let reality adjust. And here's the uncomfortable part. Some people will not like you when you stop explaining. Good. Approval was never the goal. Self-respect was. Explanation is not clarity. Explanation is fear. Let's make this practical. From today forward, apply this rule. One statement, one sentence, one decision. No backstory unless requested, no emotional cushioning, no preemptive defense. You have a choice. When someone questions you, don't rush to justify. Ask yourself, is this a request for information or an attempt to test my confidence? If it's the second, you owe them nothing. That's the key. This is not about arrogance. Arrogance overcompensates. Confidence is quiet. Confidence doesn't chase agreement. Confidence doesn't beg to be understood. You don't need their permission. Over time, something interesting happens. People start listening more carefully. They stop pushing as hard. They sense boundaries they can't easily cross, not because you became aggressive, but because you became solid. Solid people don't explain themselves. Explanation is not clarity. Explanation is fear. This chapter is about reclaiming your voice by using less of it. It's about learning that power is not in saying more, it's in knowing when to stop. And once you stop explaining, something deeper shifts. You start realizing how much of your life has been shaped by the need to be liked, how many decisions were delayed, how many truths were softened. You have a choice. You can continue living as if your life requires approval, or you can stand in your decisions and let the world adjust. That's the key. You've now taken the first step toward internal authority. But removing explanations exposes something else, something uncomfortable. When you stop explaining, you notice how deeply approval has been running your behavior. You mastered your words. Now let's confront what you've been trading them for.
Chapter 2. Approval is a trap, not a reward. Most people think approval is harmless. They think it's encouragement. They think it's motivation. They think it's connection. It's not. Approval is a contract, and most people sign it without reading the terms. You have a choice. You can accept approval as fuel, or you can recognize it as control. That's the key. The moment you need approval, your behavior changes, quietly, subtly. You don't notice it at first. You start checking reactions. You adjust your tone. You delay decisions. You soften boundaries. Not because it's right, but because you want the signal, the nod, the smile, the good job. Approval trains you, and whatever trains you controls you. You don't need their permission. Approval is not a reward for being yourself. It's a leash for staying predictable. People approve of you when you behave in ways that make them comfortable, not when you grow, not when you evolve, not when you step outside the role they assigned you. That's why approval feels good in the short term and costs you everything in the long term. It's not about confidence, it's about discipline. Explanation is not clarity. Explanation is fear. Approval is not support. Approval is conditioning. You have a choice. Look at the workplace. The employee who seeks approval constantly asks, "Is this okay?" They don't move unless reassured. They don't challenge weak systems. They don't speak plainly. And over time, they become invisible, safe, but replaceable. Now look at the one who doesn't seek approval. They act. They accept correction without collapsing. They don't need praise to function. And because of that, they earn respect, not applause. That's the key. Approval makes you emotionally dependent. Respect makes you internally stable, and the difference between the two is massive. You don't need their permission. Social media made this worse. It turned approval into a scoreboard. Likes, views, comments, numbers telling you whether you're acceptable today. And the brain adapts fast. Dopamine replaces discipline. Validation replaces values. Soon, you're not asking, is this right? You're asking, will this be approved? That's how people lose themselves. Approval is a trap because it always comes with conditions. You're approved if you stay agreeable. You're approved if you don't disrupt. You're approved if you don't outgrow the room. And the moment you don't comply, the approval disappears. You have a choice. Chase something that can be taken away at any moment, or build something no one can touch. That's the key. Let's be clear, this is not about becoming cold or isolated. This is about emotional independence. This is about removing approval as a requirement for action. You don't need their permission. Here's the hard truth. If approval disappears and you fall apart, then approval was never encouragement. It was a crutch. And crutches feel supportive until you try to walk without them. Most people never do. Approval keeps you small because it rewards consistency, not courage. It rewards repetition, not evolution. And if you're serious about building a strong mind, you cannot afford that trade. It's not about being liked. It's about being aligned. That's the key. So, what do you do instead? You replace approval with standards. Standards don't clap for you. Standards don't reassure you. Standards demand consistency whether anyone is watching or not. You act because it's right, not because it's rewarded. You speak because it's true, not because it's welcomed. You don't need their permission. This shift will feel uncomfortable at first. You'll notice the silence, the lack of feedback, the absence of emotional signals, and your mind will panic. It will ask, "Am I doing this right?" That's where discipline begins. You have a choice. You can run back to approval to calm the anxiety, or you can sit with it and grow stronger. That's the key. Approval seeking is emotional outsourcing. You're handing someone else the power to regulate how you feel about yourself, and no strong mind does that. Strong minds self-validate through action, through consistency, through keeping promises to themselves. You don't need their permission. Start practicing this. Do something aligned with your values and tell no one. No announcement, no post, no hint. Let it be unseen. Let it be quiet. Let it strengthen you instead of feeding your ego. This is how independence is built. Approval weakens repetition. Discipline strengthens identity. Explanation is not clarity. Explanation is fear. Approval is not support. Approval is conditioning. Remember this. People who require approval are easy to manipulate. Compliment them and they comply. Withhold praise and they collapse. A calm, independent mind cannot be moved that way. You have a choice. You can be managed by reactions, or you can be guided by principles. That's the key. As you release the need for approval, something changes. Your decisions get faster, your words get cleaner, your presence gets heavier. People may not cheer, but they pay attention, and that's power. You don't need their permission. But letting go of approval reveals something else. When you stop seeking it, you start noticing how much of your behavior was designed to be liked, how much of your personality was performance. That realization can sting. Good, because now you're ready to face the next cost, the quiet one, the one nobody talks about. You've stopped explaining yourself. You've seen approval for what it really is. Now let's talk about what wanting to be liked has been taking from you every single day.
Chapter 3. The Silent Cost of Wanting to be Liked. Wanting to be liked feels innocent. It feels social. It feels human. It feels harmless. It's not. Wanting to be liked has a cost, and it is paid quietly, over time, with your identity. You have a choice. You can chase likability, or you can protect alignment. That's the key. The desire to be liked doesn't shout, it whispers. It nudges. It edits you in small moments you barely notice. You laugh when you don't find it funny. You agree when you don't agree. You stay quiet when you should speak. Not because you're weak, because you want harmony. And harmony, when purchased with self-betrayal, becomes slow self-erasure. Explanation is not clarity. Explanation is fear. And likability is not connection. Likability is negotiation. You don't need their permission. Every time you adjust yourself to be liked, you send a message to your nervous system: my truth is dangerous. And the body remembers that. It tightens, it hesitates, it learns avoidance. That's how people lose their edge. You have a choice. You can tell the truth and risk discomfort, or you can edit yourself and guarantee resentment. That's the key. Look at real life. The person everyone likes is often the one with the least respect. They're agreeable, flexible, always available, but never fully trusted, never fully followed, because deep down, people sense the absence of a core. Contrast that with someone who is not universally liked, but deeply respected. They don't chase reactions. They don't smooth every edge. They speak with calm precision. And even when people disagree, they listen. Respect requires friction. Likability avoids it. You don't need their permission. The silent cost shows up in exhaustion. Constant emotional monitoring is draining. Reading rooms, adjusting tone, managing impressions. You're not tired from doing too much. You're tired from being split in two. Who you are and who you present. That split weakens the mind. You have a choice. You can integrate into one solid self, or you can continue performing for comfort. That's the key. Wanting to be liked also destroys boundaries. You say yes when you mean no. You tolerate behavior you shouldn't. You explain violations instead of enforcing limits. And every time you do, your self-respect drops a little. Not dramatically, quietly. You don't need their permission. And here's the brutal truth. People who like you for being convenient will disappear the moment you become inconvenient. So what are you really protecting? It's not about being kind, it's about being clear. Explanation is not clarity. Explanation is fear. And people-pleasing is not kindness, it's fear wearing a smile. You have a choice. Start noticing the moments you want to smooth things over. That impulse is the signal. That's where you pause. That's where you decide to stay grounded instead of agreeable. That's the key. This doesn't mean becoming abrasive. It means becoming honest without apology, calm without permission, direct without guilt. You don't need their permission. And when you stop chasing likability, something surprising happens. Some people drift away. Let them. They were attached to the version of you that required effort to maintain. What remains is cleaner, quieter, stronger. You start to feel more solid, less anxious, less reactive, because you're no longer managing impressions. You're managing principles. That's power. You have a choice. Be liked by many and known by none, or be known by few and grounded within yourself. That's the key. Wanting to be liked is emotional dependence. It hands your mood to the room. Approval rises, you rise. Disapproval hits, you collapse. That's not living. That's being remotely controlled. You don't need their permission. Start practicing controlled honesty. Say what's true without extra cushioning. Hold eye contact. Let reactions happen without rescuing them. That's how you retrain your nervous system. Discomfort is the price of independence. Explanation is not clarity. Explanation is fear. And self-respect is built in moments where you refuse to betray yourself. This chapter is not asking you to reject people. It's asking you to stop rejecting yourself for them. Because once you see the cost of wanting to be liked, you can no longer pretend it's harmless. You've seen how approval traps you. You've seen how likability drains you. Now it's time to confront the source of both, the opinions you've been giving power to. You've learned the cost. Now let's remove the influence. Chapter 4. Detach from opinions or be owned by them. Opinions are everywhere. Everyone has one. Everyone offers one. Everyone assumes theirs matters. Most of them don't. But the problem isn't their opinions. The problem is your attachment to them. You have a choice. You can observe opinions, or you can absorb them. That's the key. The moment an opinion changes your emotional state, it gains power over you. Your body reacts before your mind does. Your mood shifts. Your posture tightens. Your thoughts spiral. Not because the opinion was true, but because you allowed it authority. You don't need their permission. Opinions are cheap. They cost nothing to form and nothing to abandon. Most are projections, unfinished thoughts, emotional leaks, personal insecurities dressed up as advice. Yet people treat them like verdicts. Explanation is not clarity. Explanation is fear. And reacting to opinions is not awareness, it's dependence. You have a choice. You can let every comment adjust your internal state, or you can decide what actually matters. That's the key. Watch how easily people get owned by opinions. A single comment ruins their day. A look of disapproval shifts their behavior. They replay conversations. They rehearse responses. They give mental real estate to people who won't remember the interaction tomorrow. That's not strength. That's submission. You don't need their permission. Detachment doesn't mean ignoring feedback. It means filtering it. Strong minds separate signal from noise. They ask one question: is this useful? If not, it's discarded without emotion. No resentment, no defense, no explanation. Just release. Explanation is not clarity. Explanation is fear. Here's the rule. If an opinion doesn't come from someone you respect and it doesn't align with your values, it deserves no internal response. You don't argue with it. You don't correct it. You don't internalize it. You let it pass. You have a choice. React and stay emotionally entangled, or detach and stay sovereign. That's the key. Social environments train the opposite. They reward sensitivity. They glorify being affected. They frame detachment as coldness. But emotional distance is not indifference. It's control. You don't need their permission. Most opinions exist to pull you into someone else's emotional weather. When you react, you step into their storm. When you stay calm, they either adjust or escalate alone. And that calm is intimidating. It's not about being right. It's about being unmoved. Explanation is not clarity. Explanation is fear. And defending yourself against every opinion is a losing game. Let's make this practical. When you hear an opinion that triggers you, pause. Name the reaction: tightness, heat, urge to respond. Then do nothing. Let the sensation pass without action. This is discipline. This is training. You have a choice. You can discharge emotion through reaction, or you can build capacity through restraint. That's the key. Over time, your nervous system learns something powerful. Opinions are not threats. They're information at best, noise at worst. And once that lesson lands, people lose their leverage over you. You don't need their permission. Detachment creates space. In that space, clarity returns. You see patterns. You notice who constantly criticizes, who constantly approves, who tries to steer you through reaction. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Explanation is not clarity. Explanation is fear. This chapter is about reclaiming ownership of your internal state. No one gets access without qualification. No one gets to shape your mood without consent. Because the moment you let opinions run your emotions, you stop living from principle and start living from reaction. You've cut the need to explain. You've exposed approval. You've seen the cost of being liked. Now you're learning to stand untouched. But detachment reveals a deeper requirement. If you don't want to be moved by opinions, you need something stronger than emotion to stand on. You need internal authority. You've learned how to detach. Now let's build what replaces the noise. Chapter 5. Build internal authority. If you don't rule your own mind, something else will. Opinions, approval, fear. Internal authority is what replaces all of it. You have a choice. You can borrow certainty from the outside, or you can build it from within. That's the key. Internal authority means you trust your own judgment without asking for permission, not because you're always right, but because you're willing to take responsibility for being wrong. That's the trade most people avoid. They want certainty without consequence. You don't need their permission. People without internal authority ask before they act. They look around before deciding. They scan faces. They test reactions. They wait for green lights that never come. And while they wait, life moves past them. Strong minds decide, then adjust. Explanation is not clarity. Explanation is fear. And hesitation is not caution. It's avoidance. You have a choice. You can delay until confidence appears, or you can act and let confidence follow. That's the key. Internal authority is built through decisions, especially uncomfortable ones. Small promises kept to yourself. Boundaries enforced when it would be easier to let things slide. Action taken without applause. This is not about dominance over others. It's about command over self. You don't need their permission. Look at people you respect. They don't outsource decisions. They don't crowdsource values. They listen, but they decide alone. That solitude is not weakness. It's responsibility. And responsibility is heavy. That's why most people avoid it. You have a choice. Carry the weight of your own decisions, or carry the resentment of letting others decide for you. That's the key. Internal authority eliminates the need to explain. When you trust yourself, you don't feel the urge to justify. You state your decision because it came from a process you respect. Not impulse, not reaction, principle. Explanation is not clarity. Explanation is fear. To build this, you need standards. Standards that don't change based on mood or audience. Standards that guide behavior when emotion is loud. Sleep, training, work ethic, boundaries. These are not preferences. They are non-negotiables. You don't need their permission. Every time you honor a standard when no one is watching, your internal authority grows. Every time you violate it for comfort, it weakens. There is no neutral. You have a choice. Act in alignment and strengthen self-trust, or compromise and erode it. That's the key. Internal authority also means accepting consequences without drama. No complaining, no blaming, no explaining. You chose. You own it. This trains the mind to respect itself. People who complain don't lack intelligence. They lack authority. You don't need their permission. Here's a simple practice. Once per day, make one decisive action without consulting anyone. Something aligned, something clean. Then live with the result without commentary. This is how the muscle grows. Explanation is not clarity. Explanation is fear. As internal authority builds, something shifts. You speak less. You react less. You're no longer pulled by opinions because you're anchored by principles. That's power. You've stopped explaining. You've rejected approval. You've detached from opinions. Now you stand on your own foundation. But authority doesn't need noise. It needs restraint. And the next discipline is learning when not to speak at all. You've built the core. Now let's refine the signal. Chapter 6. Say less, mean more. Most people talk too much. They explain, they react, they fill space. Not because they have something important to say, but because silence makes them uncomfortable. Silence feels like exposure to an untrained mind. You have a choice. You can speak to release tension, or you can speak with intention. That's the key. Words are currency. The more you spend them, the less they're worth. When everything is said, nothing lands. When you talk constantly, people stop listening, even if they nod. Power is not in volume. Power is in restraint. You don't need their permission. People without internal authority feel the urge to talk, to clarify, to respond instantly, to make sure they're understood. That urgency is emotional leakage. It signals that silence threatens their sense of control. Strong minds don't rush. Explanation is not clarity. Explanation is fear. And excessive talking is not confidence. It's insecurity trying to stay visible. You have a choice. You can react immediately, or you can pause and let others reveal themselves. That's the key. Watch any high-stakes environment, negotiations, leadership rooms, crisis moments. The most grounded person speaks last, not because they're slow, but because they're deliberate. They let others talk themselves into corners. They gather information. They don't interrupt pressure with noise. Silence becomes leverage. You don't need their permission. When you say less, people project more. They fill the gaps with assumptions. Some will rush to impress. Some will over-explain. Some will expose motives. All of it gives you clarity. Talking less gives you information. Talking more gives it away. That's the trade. Explanation is not clarity. Explanation is fear. Here's a discipline. Before you speak, ask one question. Does this add value or release anxiety? If it's the second, stay silent. That's how you train restraint. You have a choice. Use words to stabilize yourself, or use words to communicate direction. That's the key. Silence also regulates emotion. When you don't immediately respond, your nervous system settles. You regain control. You choose response instead of reaction. Reaction is loud. Response is precise. You don't need their permission. This is especially important during confrontation. When challenged, the instinct is to defend, to explain, to counter. Silence disrupts that dynamic. It forces the other person to carry the weight of their own words. Often, they collapse under it. Explanation is not clarity. Explanation is fear. Let's talk about respect. People respect those who don't compete for airtime, who don't chase agreement, who don't talk over others to be seen. Calm presence communicates more than any argument. You have a choice. Dominate conversations or dominate yourself. That's the key. When you speak less, your tone changes. Slower, lower, cleaner. Your words stop chasing reactions. They land. And because they land, they last. People remember them. You don't need their permission. There's also discipline in listening, real listening, not waiting to speak, but absorbing. Most people listen to respond. Strong minds listen to understand. Understanding gives you advantage. Explanation is not clarity. Explanation is fear. Practice this daily. Allow pauses. Don't rush to fill them. Let silence stretch. Watch how uncomfortable it makes people. That discomfort is not your responsibility to fix. Silence is not awkwardness, it's control. You have a choice. Reduce noise, increase impact. That's the key. As you say less, you'll notice resistance, both internal and external. People may ask, "Why are you so quiet?" That question reveals dependency. They were feeding off your reactions. You don't need their permission. This chapter is about discipline of expression, not suppression, but refinement, not withdrawal, but precision. When your mind is strong, it doesn't announce itself. It operates. You've learned to stop explaining. You've stepped out of approval. You've detached from opinions. You've built internal authority. Now your words reflect that strength. But silence alone is not enough, because some people don't want your words. They want your performance. And the next step is to stop giving it to them. You've refined your voice. Now let's remove the mask.
Chapter 7. Stop performing. Start existing. Most people are exhausted, and they don't know why. They blame work. They blame stress. They blame life. But the real drain is performance. You are tired because you are acting. You have a choice. You can perform to be accepted, or you can exist without permission. That's the key. Performance is not confidence. Performance is management. Managing reactions, managing impressions, managing expectations. It's a constant, invisible labor, and it never ends. Because the moment you stop performing, you fear losing approval. You don't need their permission. Performance begins early. You learn which version of yourself gets rewarded, which tone is liked, which opinions are safe, which emotions are allowed. And slowly, you build a character that survives socially but costs you internally. Explanation is not clarity. Explanation is fear. And performance is not strength. Performance is survival. You have a choice. You can keep surviving socially, or you can start living truthfully. That's the key. Performing fragments the mind. There's the real you and the acceptable you, the real thoughts and the edited ones, the real emotions and the approved display. Holding that split requires constant attention. That's why people feel anxious for no clear reason. They are managing a lie, even if it's subtle. You don't need their permission. When you stop performing, you stop asking, "How should I appear?" and start asking, "What's true right now?" That shift alone restores energy. Truth doesn't drain you. Pretense does. Explanation is not clarity. Explanation is fear. Look around. The loudest people are often the most performative. Big reactions, big opinions, big personalities, all movement, no center. They are constantly signaling identity instead of living it. Real strength is quiet because it doesn't need reinforcement. You have a choice. Signal who you are or be who you are. That's the key. Performance also distorts relationships. People don't connect with you. They connect with the role you play. And then you wonder why you feel unseen. You're surrounded but alone. Because no one has met the real you. You don't need their permission. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Some people only like you when you perform. They benefit from your agreeableness, your humor, your emotional labor. When you stop, they feel deprived. Let them. Anyone who requires performance for connection is not offering connection at all. Explanation is not clarity. Explanation is fear. Stopping performance doesn't mean becoming blunt or careless. It means removing unnecessary effort. You stop trying to control outcomes through personality. You show up clean, neutral, grounded. And that presence does more than performance ever could. You have a choice. Use energy to impress or use energy to align. That's the key. When you exist instead of perform, your behavior becomes consistent.
Not because you're rigid, but because you're real. No mood swings based on audience, no shifting values based on room. Consistency builds trust. Performance builds confusion. You don't need their permission. This chapter asks you to notice where you're acting, where your tone changes, where your posture shifts, where your opinions soften. Those are tells. That's where you're leaking energy. Awareness is the first cut. Explanation is not clarity. Explanation is fear. Here's a practice. Enter a room and do nothing extra. No over-smiling, no forced enthusiasm, no identity signaling. Just be present. Observe. Speak only when necessary. Feel the discomfort. Don't fix it. That discomfort is withdrawal from performance, and like any withdrawal, it passes, leaving clarity behind. You have a choice. Return to the role or sit in authenticity. That's the key. As you stop performing, some people will react. They'll ask if you're okay. They'll interpret calm as distance. They'll project stories onto your silence. Let them. Their reaction is information, not instruction. You don't need their permission. Here's what replaces performance: presence. Presence doesn't chase. It doesn't entertain. It doesn't explain. It doesn't audition. It simply occupies space without apology. Presence is felt. Performance is consumed. Explanation is not clarity. Explanation is fear. When you exist fully, you become harder to manipulate. Performers are predictable. They respond to cues. They adjust for reward. Present people don't. That unpredictability is strength. You have a choice. Be programmable or be grounded. That's the key. Stopping performance also sharpens boundaries. You stop laughing at disrespect. You stop tolerating subtle violations, not aggressively, naturally. Because when you're not acting, incongruence becomes obvious, and you remove yourself without drama. You don't need their permission. This chapter is about removing the mask, not to shock others, but to stabilize yourself. You're not becoming less social. You're becoming less artificial, and artificial things always break under pressure. You've learned to speak less. Now you've learned to stop acting. But something remains. Even without performance, even without noise, emotions still rise, reactions still appear. The difference now is you don't feed them. To live without approval, you must master something deeper: your emotional state. You've removed the mask. Now you must regulate what's underneath.
Chapter 8. Emotional independence is a skill. Most people think emotional independence is a personality trait. They think you're either calm or you're not, strong or sensitive, unaffected or emotional. That's a lie. Emotional independence is not a trait, it's a skill. And like any skill, it is trained. You have a choice. You can let emotions drive behavior, or you can train yourself to contain them. That's the key. Emotions are not the enemy. They are signals, but most people confuse signal with command. They feel something and immediately act on it. Speak, react, explain, defend. That reflex is what keeps them dependent. You don't need their permission. An emotionally independent person still feels anger, still feels anxiety, still feels hurt. The difference is simple and critical. They don't obey it. Explanation is not clarity. Explanation is fear. This is why emotionally independent people appear calm, not because they feel less, but because they act later, and timing changes everything. You have a choice. React fast and regret it, or wait and respond clean. That's the key. Another trap is emotional storytelling. The mind turns feeling into narrative. They disrespected me. This always happens. I should say something. That story fuels reaction. Cut the story. Stay with sensation, tightness, heat, pressure.
Let it rise and fall without commentary. Sensations pass, stories linger. You don't need their permission. This takes practice. At first, it feels unnatural. You'll want relief. You'll want reassurance. You'll want expression. Don't take the bait. Emotional independence is built in discomfort. Explanation is not clarity. Explanation is fear. Now let's talk about validation. Most people don't want solutions. They want validation. They want someone to say, "You're right to feel this way." That feels supportive, but it reinforces dependence. Strong minds self-validate. They say, "This emotion exists. I can handle it." You have a choice. Seek soothing from others or build tolerance within yourself. That's the key. Self-regulation also means not using emotion as justification. I was angry. I was stressed. I was overwhelmed. Those are explanations, not accountability. Emotion explains nothing. Behavior defines everything. You don't need their permission. Here's a discipline. Never make decisions at emotional extremes. Not when high, not when low. Calm is your operating state. If you can't access calm, you wait. Waiting is strength. Explanation is not clarity. Explanation is fear. Emotional independence also requires reducing emotional input. News, social media, arguments, drama. Constant stimulation keeps the nervous system reactive. You cannot regulate what you keep provoking. Silence is part of regulation. You have a choice. Consume chaos or protect stability. That's the key. As you train this skill, you'll notice something powerful. Situations that used to hook you don't. Comments that once lingered pass. Silence that once triggered anxiety becomes neutral. This is freedom. You don't need their permission. People may accuse you of being distant, cold, unemotional. Let them. What they're really noticing is that they no longer have access to your internal state. That loss feels threatening to dependent minds. Explanation is not clarity. Explanation is fear. Emotional independence does not mean emotional suppression. Suppression stores emotion. Regulation processes it. You feel it fully, privately, without making it everyone else's problem. That maturity is rare. You have a choice. Leak emotion into the environment or contain it and convert it into clarity. That's the key. As you train this skill, you'll notice something powerful. Situations that used to hook you don't. Comments that once lingered pass. Silence that once triggered anxiety becomes neutral. This is freedom. You don't need their permission. People may accuse you of being distant, cold, unemotional. Let them. What they're really noticing is that they no longer have access to your internal state. That loss feels threatening to dependent minds. Explanation is not clarity. Explanation is fear. Emotional independence does not mean emotional suppression. Suppression stores emotion. Regulation processes it. You feel it fully, privately, without making it everyone else's problem. That maturity is rare. You have a choice. Leak emotion into the environment or contain it and convert it into clarity. That's the key. As you train this skill, you'll notice something powerful. Situations that used to hook you don't. Comments that once lingered pass. Silence that once triggered anxiety becomes neutral. This is freedom. You don't need their permission. This chapter completes a shift. You no longer explain. You no longer perform. You no longer react. You regulate. And when you regulate, you become self-sufficient. But there's one final challenge. When you stop seeking approval, stop performing, stop reacting, you will find yourself walking alone more often. Not isolated, but independent. And that requires one more refinement. How to walk alone without becoming bitter. You've mastered emotional independence. Now let's protect your humanity. Chapter 9. Walk alone without becoming bitter. There will be a moment when the noise fades. No approval, no reassurance, no audience. And suddenly, it's just you. This is where most people fail, not because they're weak, but because they confuse independence with isolation. You have a choice. You can walk alone with clarity, or you can walk alone and grow bitter. That's the key. Bitterness is what happens when someone expects reward for restraint, when they think, I've been disciplined, I've stayed quiet, where is my recognition? That expectation poisons independence. True independence expects nothing. You don't need their permission. Walking alone doesn't mean rejecting people. It means no longer needing them to validate your direction. You still respect, you still care, you just don't outsource your worth. Bitterness comes from hidden contracts. Explanation is not clarity. Explanation is fear. And bitterness is discipline with entitlement. You have a choice. Release expectation or carry resentment. That's the key. When you stop seeking approval, relationships change. Some weaken, some disappear, some grow stronger. This is not punishment, it's alignment. But if you interpret every loss as rejection, bitterness forms. If you see it as filtration, clarity remains. You don't need their permission. Look at people who are bitter. They speak in blame. They carry old conversations. They replay injustices. They measure what they gave versus what they received. That accounting never balances. Strong minds don't keep score. They keep direction. You have a choice. Focus on who stayed or focus on where you're going. That's the key. Walking alone requires humility. Not thinking you're better, but knowing you're responsible. You chose discipline. Others didn't. That doesn't make them wrong. It makes paths different. Bitterness judges. Strength observes. You don't need their permission. Another source of bitterness is comparison. You see others rewarded for behavior you outgrew, louder, flashier, more performative, and your mind asks, why them, not me? That question is poison. Explanation is not clarity. Explanation is fear, and comparison is attention wasted. You have a choice. Measure against others or measure against your own standards. That's the key. Walking alone means your feedback loop is internal. Progress is quiet. Recognition is delayed, sometimes absent. If you expect external reward, independence collapses. Discipline is its own reward. You don't need their permission. Bitterness also forms when discipline becomes rigid, when you isolate instead of detach, when you withdraw instead of remain open. Independence without warmth turns into arrogance. That's not strength. Strength is grounded openness, calm presence. You don't chase, but you don't close. You have a choice. Be independent and accessible, or independent and defensive. That's the key. To walk alone without bitterness, you must replace validation with meaning. Meaning comes from purpose, from progress, from self-respect built daily through action. When meaning is present, approval becomes irrelevant. You don't need their permission. Here's a discipline. Do one thing daily that strengthens you and benefits no one else. No recognition, no sharing, just alignment. That builds quiet satisfaction. Bitterness feeds on emptiness. Fulfillment starves it. Explanation is not clarity. Explanation is fear. You'll also need forgiveness, not for others, but for yourself, for the years you spent chasing approval, for the compromises, for the delays. Bitterness often hides self-judgment. Release it. You have a choice. Punish your past self or integrate and move forward. That's the key. As you walk alone, you'll notice something powerful. You're less reactive, less needy, less driven by noise. Your presence stabilizes environments, not because you demand respect, but because you don't seek it. That calm attracts the right people. You don't need their permission. Some will misunderstand your quiet. Some will label it distance. Let them. Interpretation is not instruction. Explanation is not clarity. Explanation is fear. Walking alone is not loneliness. Loneliness needs others to fill a void. Independence fills the void internally. Once filled, connection becomes choice, not necessity. You have a choice. Connect from fullness or attach from lack. That's the key. This chapter prepares you for the final state. Not reactive, not performative, not dependent, just solid. But there is one final refinement: how to become so grounded that nothing, praise, criticism, loss, or silence, moves you off-center. You've learned to walk alone without bitterness. Now it's time to become unmovable.
Chapter 10. Become unmovable. An unmovable mind is not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't react. It doesn't chase. It stays. This is the final state, not perfection, but stability. You have a choice. You can live in reaction, or you can live from center. That's the key. Being unmovable does not mean nothing affects you. It means nothing controls you. Praise doesn't inflate you. Criticism doesn't collapse you. Loss doesn't break you. Silence doesn't unsettle you. You feel, but you don't drift. You don't need their permission. Most people are moved by whatever hits them last. A compliment lifts them. A comment drops them. A bad day derails them. Their identity shifts with circumstance. That's instability. An unmovable mind is anchored to principle, not emotion. Explanation is not clarity. Explanation is fear. And emotional fluctuation without correction is weakness. You have a choice. Anchor to feelings or anchor to standards. That's the key. Standards don't change based on mood. They don't negotiate with circumstances. They guide behavior when conditions are uncertain. Sleep when tired. Train when resistant. Work when uninspired. Speak when necessary. Remain silent when not. These are not preferences. They are structure. You don't need their permission. Being unmovable also means you stop announcing progress. You stop seeking acknowledgement. You stop narrating your discipline. You let results speak quietly over time. Noise fades. Structure remains. Explanation is not clarity. Explanation is fear. An unmovable person does not rush. Urgency is often fear disguised as importance. Calm execution outlasts frantic motion every time. You move when it's time. You wait when it's not. That timing is mastery. You have a choice: react to pressure or operate above it. That's the key. People will test you, not consciously but instinctively. They will poke your boundaries, question your calm, challenge your silence. They are checking for cracks. Don't explain. Don't justify. Don't react. Hold. You don't need their permission. The unmovable mind understands something final. Nothing outside can add to or subtract from your worth. Circumstances change, opinions shift, roles end, identity remains. This removes fear at the root. Explanation is not clarity. Explanation is fear. Being unmovable also means embracing boredom, routine, repetition, doing the same disciplined actions even when they no longer excite you. Most people quit here. You don't. Consistency builds identity. Intensity builds moments. You have a choice. Chase emotional highs or build long-term strength. That's the key. An unmovable mind is not rigid. It adapts, but only after evaluation, not pressure. Flexibility without principles is weakness. Principles without flexibility is fragility. Balance is control. You don't need their permission.
At this level, life simplifies, decisions become fewer, reactions become rare, energy is conserved, focus deepens. You stop managing impressions and start managing direction. That's freedom. Explanation is not clarity. Explanation is fear. Look back at who you were when this book began, explaining, seeking approval, performing, reacting, dependent on noise. That version is gone. You have a choice. Return to that state or remain grounded here. That's the key. Being unmovable doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you care selectively. You invest where it matters. You withdraw where it doesn't. Attention becomes intentional. You don't need their permission. This is not a finish line. It's a maintenance state. You will be tested again. Emotions will rise. Opinions will appear. Approval will tempt. When it does, return to the basics. Pause, decide, act, move on. Explanation is not clarity. Explanation is fear. You now have the structure. A mind that doesn't need approval, a nervous system that doesn't seek reassurance, a presence that doesn't explain itself. The final challenge is simple and permanent. Live this without announcing it. Practice this without praise. Maintain this without applause. You don't need their permission. Stay unmovable.
You are done asking. You are done explaining. You are done performing for approval. You don't need permission to move. You don't need validation to decide. You don't need applause to be solid. You have a choice, always. Live reacting to opinions or live anchored in discipline. That's the key. From this moment forward, let silence replace explanation. Let standards replace approval. Let calm replace reaction. When doubt appears, don't argue with it. When pressure rises, don't perform for it. When approval disappears, don't chase it. You don't need their permission. Your challenge is simple and non-negotiable. For the next 30 days, act without seeking approval once. No explanations, no announcements, no emotional outsourcing. Decide, execute, move on. Build quietly. Stand alone when required. Remain unmovable regardless of response. This is not confidence. This is discipline. And discipline makes you free.